Hey everyone, I'm Joachim, and today I want to show you a really useful feature in Houdini that lets you customize how nodes behave and look completely automatically. For example, imagine if you have 20 lights in your scene, and instead of clicking each one to see which one is enabled, they could automatically turn yellow when on and black when off, thus giving you constant visual feedback as you're working through your scene. This is all made possible using Python callback scripts. Now, this video won't make you an expert in Python, but hopefully it'll spark some ideas on how you can leverage this feature for your own needs and workflows. So whether you want something simple or more complex, it's totally up to you. But first, let's see how we can set these scripts up.
So what exactly is a callback script? Well, in short, it's bits of Python code that runs automatically when certain events happen in Houdini. Like when you create a node, when you load a file, or when you change a parameter of a said node. The setup is actually really straightforward. Go to your Houdini preference folder. I'm going to create a folder called scripts. And inside of this, we're going to create a new folder called SOP. And you can replace this with whatever context that the node you want to affect lives in. So for example, obj, if you're in Solaris, it would be lop. You get the point. But for now, let's stick with SOP. Inside of this folder, we can create Python files to follow a simple naming convention. All you need is the internal node name of the node that you want to affect, and the name of the event. If you're unsure what the internal node name is called, you can go into Houdini and click this I button, and if you check this field here in parentheses, this is the name of the node. I'm going to create a simple example where we color and set a specific shape to a null node anytime it's created. Open up any text editor. I use Sublime, but you can use any text editor that you want. I'm going to copy this path, and then I'm going to save the script in here. And the node name that we want to grab is null, and the event name that we want to add is onCreated. And important to remember here is to add the dot extension. In our case, that's going to be .py. Now let's write some Python. This is going to be super simple. First, I'm going to create a variable and grab the node. And we can grab the node with the quarks argument. So when we're saying quarks node, we're essentially saying, give me the node that triggered the script. And since the node name we picked in this instance is the null, this will only affect the null nodes. It's kind of like Houdini handing you the node and saying, here, do something with this. So we can take that node and we're going to set the color. And we can do this with who.color, and then we can type in a color. So this is going to be a reddish color. And then let's also pick a shape for our node. So we can do this with node.setUserData. And the user data that we want to set is the node shape. And let's pick the circle as the default node shape. That's it. Just 3 lines. I'm going to hit save and close this down. Now let's launch Houdini and see what happens when we create a null node in the SOP context. So if I append a new null node, we can see that it set the color to a reddish color and it's a circle. Now, in this case, I already had a null in my scene. So what if we also want this operation to happen to our nulls even for pre-existing nulls? To fix this, we can duplicate our script and we can just rename it to OnLoaded instead. So now whenever a Houdini file gets launched, it'll run the same operation on all the nodes. And just to prove that that works, I'm just going to close this down and reload. And now when we load the file, you can see that we have the same result for both of our nulls. Here's another example where I'm running over Redshift light nodes. So what I'm doing is I'm checking for the lights_enabled parameter, and if it's on, the nodes will be colored yellow, and if they're off, the nodes will be colored black. And this just gives me a visual indicator of which lights are turned on and which lights are turned off. And I find that this is super useful when you're working with complex lighting setups and need to quickly see which lights are contributing to your render. Here's another example that automatically highlight nodes that have animation. This one works a little bit different though, so instead of putting it in the scripts SOP folder, we'll use a file called 456.py, and this will live in the main scripts folder. This script runs once when Houdini starts up or when you load a file. And I find this script to be especially useful when you open someone else's file and want to see what nodes that they have appended any keyframes on. Now, if you're an artist or designer like me, and not like the most tech savvy when it comes to like scripting and Python, we can still leverage these more technical features in Houdini by taking help with something like Claude or OpenAI's ChatGPT. What I find is, as long as you're able to give the AI enough context on what you're looking to create, it should be able to create these scripts for you pretty easily. So here I've asked it to write out all of the event handlers that exist. I'm going to export this as a .txt and provide that in the upload as well so you can download it. But this should hopefully give you a little bit more information on the events that you can trigger and what you can do with this.
Alright, so those are a few practical examples to get you started. And the beauty of this feature is that you can customize it however you want. You could, for example, auto-name nodes, set default parameter values, automatically position nodes. Really, the possibilities are pretty broad once you start thinking about repetitive tasks that you could let Houdini handle for you. I'd recommend to start with 1 or 2 scripts that solve real problems in your workflow. For me, the Redshift Lite example has been a huge time saver. And I'll make sure to leave a link to those scripts shown in this video below in case you'd like to implement them or build upon them for your own workflows. And if you come up with any other creative uses for feedback scripts, feel free to drop a comment in the comment section. I'd love to hear what you come up with. With that said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.